Yes, thank you. I'll just share my screen. Okay. So, hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Aditi Goswami, a first year finance student with a great interest in psychology, who has found a very interesting book to review today. So, this book has war, action, romance, and a few lessons and theories related to the stock market. So, this is the book that made people ask on Quora and leave reviews on Amazon about W.D. Gann, a very successful trader and author of this book. They called him and accused him of being a con man, a cheat, or a scammer. So, like I said, W.D. Gann is the author of this book. He used to be a finance trader who had made huge profits in the stock market, which some say amounted to $50 million in his time, using his forecasting methods based on geometry, mathematics, astronomy, and astrology. Now, when I say huge profits, I mean around $400 million in today's time. So, personally, I feel that it's very important to talk about the author of the book before discussing the book itself. So, that's what I'll start with. So, W.D. Gann was born in 1878 in Texas and was the son of a cotton farmer. He started trading when he was 24 years old and was considered to be a great student of the Bible. He apparently believed that the Bible was the greatest book ever written, and this is evident in the book that I'm going to be reviewing today as well. So he developed the technical analysis methods like the Gann angles and master charts. So by reading the book, you might think that W.D. Gann was a very religious person. However, a careful analysis of his work shows that he was actually against the conventional Christian teaching, which he has mentioned in this book as well. So, coming to the name of the book that I'm going to be reviewing today, it is called The Tunnel Through the Air or Looking Back from 1940. This book is a science fiction novel which was written by Gann in 1927. Interestingly enough, one of the first passages of the book goes like this. This book has a threefold purpose. First, it is an interesting romance. Second, it teaches a moral lesson and proves the natural laws laid down in the Bible. Third, it shows the value of science, foreknowledge, and preparedness. It has been well said that truth is stranger than fiction. This story is founded on facts and events, many of which have happened or will happen in the future. The tunnel through the air is mysterious and contains a valuable secret, clothed in vain language. Some will find it the first time they read it, others will see it in the second reading, but the greatest number will find the hidden secret when they read it the third time. So clearly, this book talks a lot about encoding what's written in it and a trading secret that's hidden here. Some traders believe that Gann has encoded some techniques of financial astrology into this book, and some even claim that they have devoted a lifetime to study this text. Now, the original 1927 book cover shows some planes flying around a tunnel in the sky, as you can see on the slide as well. Now, this story starts with a young Robert, who is also the main character, who was born on 9th June 1906. He was born into a small family with his mother, his father, and a brother who had already passed away in war. Now, the passing away of his older brother had ingrained the ill effects of war into Robert's mother's mind, and she was completely against the idea of any of her sons being in the war ever. So, the protagonist, Robert Gordon, was always taught the importance of love and peace by his family and the church that he regularly went to. Now, there are a lot of parallels from this story to the values which are important while trading in the stock market. In chapter 3 and 4, there are a couple of poems that Robert himself has written about the importance of not being too selfish and not hoping a lot for things to go your way while trading in the stock market. One thing about this book is that you'll find a lot of poems and texts quoted from the Bible. These are the type of texts which you can interpret as you please, since there is no one meaning that you can find from them. This book not only teaches lessons about the stock market, but also lessons about life in general, about what our mindset should be as human beings. So at school, he met a girl named Mary through a mutual friend of theirs named Carolyn. He immediately fell in love with Mary and confessed his love for her. Surprisingly, she felt the same way. And so they started a relationship which lasted throughout high school and even throughout Robert's college. Now, Mary was from a family with a higher social status than Robert, and this motivated him to try his best to be the most successful person he could be to prove himself worthy of her. Robert had taken a great interest in science and math and was specializing in chemistry. Robert was also very great at mechanics, and so he went on to work with his best friend Walter's father while Walter went to get his degree at Columbia. Mary was Robert's muse. She was the one who inspired him to work hard and made him more passionate about the things that he was working on because he wanted to give Mary the best life possible. Robert had a huge interest in the Bible. And just like the author of this book, W.D. Gann, Robert too felt that Bible was the greatest book ever written. There are a lot of similarities between the author of this book, W.D. Gann, and the main character in the story, Robert. It's almost as if Gann has written a fictional autobiography. So Robert used to read the Bible all the time. One day, while analyzing the book, Robert felt that the Bible was telling him something. He realized that the Bible was actually predicting a war that was about to come in just a few years. By interpreting the text in the Bible, he found out that the war was going to be from 1927 to 1932. Robert was extremely patriotic as a person. His life's goal revolved only around the love of his wife, Mary, and his country, the United States. He immediately got to work. He started working on his invention that would help save his beloved country in the war, and he believed that the war was surely coming. He was also started to trade in the stock market on the basis of what the Bible was telling him. So this is something that takes up almost 1/5 of the book, how the Bible helped him predict the future, not just about war, but also the world's environment. This book shows how Robert analyzed specific texts in the Bible to find out what was going to happen. He analyzed the texts written in the Bible and they helped him make a huge profit in the stock market since he already knew what was going to happen in the world. So in chapter 4, we also see a very beautiful and inspiring text by Christian D. Larson. The article is called A Standard, and I'll just read a part of it quickly. To be so strong that nothing can disturb your peace of mind. To make all your friends see that there is something in them. To look at the funny side of everything and make your optimism come true. To think only of the best, to work only for the best, and to expect only the best. To be just as enthusiastic about success of others as you are about your own. To forget the mistakes of the past and press on to the greater achievements of the future. To wear a cheerful countenance at all times and give every living creature you meet a smile. To give so much time to the improvement of yourself that you have no time to criticize others. To live in the faith that the whole world is on your side, so long as you are true to the best that is in you. So there are many poems like this in the book, which help shape your mindset towards life and how to live it. So going back to the story, like I said, Robert was analyzing the Bible to predict the future. As per him, the Bible talked about everything burning down within 7 years' time. This either meant 7 years or 7 days, since he had read somewhere in the Bible that a year means a day and a day means a year. So this particular text actually reminds me of the fractal patterns in the stock market. Fractals are basically patterns that repeat at different scales. You must have heard that in the stock market, we see that the price patterns usually repeat themselves. You'll find the same candlestick pattern in a day's chart and a minutes candlestick chart. And it makes sense too. The stock market is a system that arises from natural human behavior. Our emotions and our sentiment drive the market. That's why fractals are a part of its price history as well. Since human behavior is repetitive, the price patterns in the stock market are also repetitive. That's why fractals help us to calculate the probabilities of future market movements. So till now, Robert had been born, he had fallen in love with Mary, and had predicted through the Bible that a war was going to come and wanted to save his country. So Robert goes to his employer, Mr. Kennerworth, to tell him about his idea about trading in the stock market. Robert wanted to trade in the stock market to make enough money to fund his inventions to save his country. He did not have any selfish motives to earn money. Mr. Kenilworth were honestly not very happy about this. He sent Robert a letter telling him about his own experience in the stock market. He wrote about how when he was young, his friend had suggested buying oil stocks, and he followed and lost most of his money because he didn't know anything about the stock market in his youth. Luckily, he had gotten out of the stock market even though his friends told him to keep buying more to average out the loss. The prices fell even lower, so he was lucky to have gotten out of the trade when he did. Now his employer, Mr. Kenilworth, had made huge profits in the beginning of the trade, but had lost all of it by the end. So he didn't want Robert to end up the same way and commit the same mistakes that he did. So this letter actually shows us three important lessons about trading in the stock market. The first is don't get into a trade you know nothing about. Second is get out of the trade if you realize that you were wrong rather than averaging out the loss. The third is always set a profit limit and get out when you have reached it. Now, Robert does manage to convince Mr. Kenilworth by telling him about his noble intentions of trying to save his country from the upcoming war and get his blessing. Moving on to chapter 7, I personally found this chapter very interesting. Robert talks about the importance of geometry and maths in the world. He says that his calculations depends on the cycle theory and mathematical sequences. Now, cycle theory's main teaching is that history repeats itself. Robert quotes the Bible and says, there is no new thing under the sun. He mentioned the city of Atlantis, the civilization underwater, and how they had all the technologies, and after 1,000 years, we are just rediscovering those great technologies now. He says that everything in the universe is either elliptical or circular, and that everything goes around and comes back to you. So in this book, Gyan mentions a very interesting article, which was actually published in the New York Times as well, about the Palace of Minos, where archaeologists found modern apartment houses, bathtubs, and corsets, which are similar as we use today. The plumbing that they had found was so excellent that even after thousands of years, they were still working. It was estimated that this city was destroyed 5,000 years ago. His point was that the technologies that we are just discovering have been here on Earth thousands of years ago, and what we are making today is nothing new. History repeats itself, and all of what is happening right now has already happened before. Now, quoting Robert in the story, I'll say that cycles always repeat. You just need to know which cycle will repeat to predict what will happen. Now, after getting his employer's blessings to start trading in the stock market, Robert wanted to go to New York to build his inventions and the airplane that would help him to win the war, which the Bible predicted would happen very soon now. So Robert asked Mary to drop out of college to come with him to New York to support him while he was working on his inventions. Now, Mary had actually refused at first, as she wanted to finish her degree and had also told Robert that she wanted him to work in New York without any distractions. Robert did not agree to this, So Mary eventually agreed that she would elope with him and go to New York. Before going to New York with Mary to work on his invention, Robert told his broker to buy cotton, but only with using a stop loss. One of the many lessons that W.D. Gann teaches is to always use a stop loss. A stop loss helps you to prevent unnecessary losses, and it's always advised to use one. Robert also told his employer, Mr. Kenneilworth, to keep buying more cotton as the profits came, which is a technique called pyramiding. This is taught in other books of W.D. Gann as well, such as The Truth of the Stock Tape. Pyramiding is basically adding to a position to take full advantage of high-performing assets and thus minimizing returns. In simple terms, it basically means not to put all of your capital in one position, but rather dividing parts of it to keep buying more if your stock shows strength and the trade is going your way. Pyramiding reduces your risk as an investor since you don't use all of your capital at once and keep buying only if the market is going your way. Now, Robert loved Mary more than he loved himself. He gifted her a diamond ring and took her to the train from which they would travel to New York. Robert was extremely happy since he was with the love of his life going to New York to build inventions to save his country. They planned on getting married the next day as soon as the train stopped and they had arrived in New York. However, when Robert woke up in the train, everything had changed. Mary was nowhere to be seen. She had left him on the day they decided to get married. Robert was understandably beside himself and was completely inconsolable. He saw a letter that she had left in his pocket, which said, I'll come to you when I need the most, and your need for love is the greatest. This letter gave him faith that she would surely come back to him. And we see as the book progresses that he never really moves on from her. So Robert called his best friend Walter and told him that he won't come to New York till he finds out what happened to Mary. All of the worst case scenarios were going through his head. What if she was kidnapped or murdered? I mean, who knew? He hadn't seen her. So he puts up a notice in all of the newspapers in the hopes of finding Mary, but she never comes back. He gets a letter from her parents saying that they haven't seen her, but they know that she's safe and that she would come back soon. So his 21st birthday comes and goes, and she still hasn't come back to him. He got so desperate to find the love of his life that he went to a clairvoyant and an astrologer whose ad he found in the newspaper. They told him that she'd come back to him very soon and would meet him in New York. Now, his best friend Walter didn't like the fact that Robert was still waiting on Mary, who had just left him all alone in a train. In chapter 14, in the hopes of making Robert feel better, Walter tells Robert to forget about Mary and quotes a very interesting thing. He says, the pessimist says it can't be done. The optimist says, let George do it. And the pessimist has already done it. He said, Robert, you are a pessimist. You do it while the other fellow watches and waits, or said it can't be done. This really motivated Robert to work harder. He started thinking about the upcoming war and how he was going to save his beloved country, the United States. He thought about how jealous the neighboring countries were becoming from the United States gold reserves and how there was a huge possibility that this is why they were going to attack. So Robert and Walter decided to open an office at Wall Street to start trading and kept Miss Edna Quinton as the office assistant. Robert had always kept Mary's accounts separate to trade and earn profits for her so that he could give her the money as proof of his loyalty to her and show that he had never forgotten about her. So he was still hoping on Mary to come back. In chapter 16, Walter introduced Robert to a very interesting character who only stays in the book for like half a chapter but had a huge impact on Robert. This character is Mr. Henry Watson. Henry was a very old man who used to be a Wall Street veteran, meaning that he had spent all of his life trading there and had a lot of experience. He told Robert about the causes of failure at Wall Street and how many traders had earned $1 million but lost it all. Through storytelling, he taught Robert lessons about trading in the stock market, such as to focus on the one thing that you know. He told Robert that the failures at Wall Street had diversified too much and did not specialize in one commodity or a few specific stocks that they knew well, but had spread all over the board. The second cause of failure was that men tried recouping their losses rather than getting out when the stock was against them. He told Robert that the man's greatest enemy in speculation is hope. Henry actually dies right in front of Robert due to a heart attack while clutching the picture of his own high school sweetheart. This made Robert miss Mary even more, and he decided to once again try his best to find her. He tries to find Mary again through private investigators and newspaper ads, but sadly he couldn't. So after opening an office with Walter in New York, Robert was making a huge success at Wall Street and started working on his inventions as well. He makes two major inventions: a silent motor, also known as a muffler, which would help airplanes fly without making a single sound or alerting anyone. And the second invention was actually a machine that is able to read the minds of people even if they are far away. The US government in this story makes a huge mistake by rejecting the inventions of Robert, and so he sells the muffler to the Japanese government, who were more than willing to buy it and were actually the United States enemy. Now, just as Robert had predicted, the war begins with Japan and Spain attacking the US. The enemies of the US were able to bring all of the countries in the world to go against them with the promise of sharing those gold reserves. But only France and Canada stayed by the United States side and helped them. Now, throughout the rest of the book, Robert makes many inventions. A few of those he named after his love, Mary. I'll talk about the main inventions which also inspired the book title. So the first is that he made a special sleeping gas that could sedate people for 7 days without harming them. So his main aim was to win the war without hurting anyone. The second, he made an invention called the demon of death, which could quite literally melt anything in front of it. He made this to only be used in case of emergencies. And lastly, he was successful in making a tunnel through the air through waves, which was basically a vacuum of sorts, which could hold or suspend anything that comes in the air within it. And nothing that came in the tunnel could basically move. His plan was to use them all together to trap the enemy's airplanes in the air and sedate everyone while he melted their arms and equipment so that they won't be able to harm anyone in the future. Now, towards the end of the book, we find that Robert is able to single-handedly defeat the countries using his invention with the help of his best friend, Walter, and his assistant, Edna. At the celebration, Walter makes a toast to Robert and talks about how Mary had made the ultimate sacrifice. He says, "Had she married you, Robert Gordon, the great inspiration which has made you the greatest inventor of the world and the Prince of Peace would have been lacking. The great desire for love and your longing for Mary has stimulated your ambition, kept hope in your breast, and endowed you with the power to subdue the enemies of the world and to unite the world." Now, there is a huge twist at the end of the book that I would rather not spoil for anyone. Personally, I don't usually read books of fiction genre, but this book taught me a lot, and I believe that it's worth reading at least once, even if you don't want to read it thrice like Dan suggested to find the secret hidden. So talking about the readers' reviews, people are actually divided on their opinion about this book. So by looking at the reviews, I can divide people into three groups. The first group of people suggested not reading this book at all since they were extremely dissatisfied because they weren't able to find the secret code that was hidden in this book. The second group of people recommended reading this book and also wrote about how they had understood the secret. I actually also saw a review that said that they were finally able to decode Gang's message in this book after 11 years of reading this book multiple times. The third group just consists of one review that I saw, which said that this version of the book, which is widely available today, has some of the sentences missing, which is true. The version of the book that I read also had some of the sentences missing in it. So this review said that to decode the message, you will need a clear roadmap of what to look for. That even the page numbers and the individual letters are important to decode this. So many people probably were not able to find this message because they had the widely distributed version of this book. So I agree with the third group. Personally, I was not able to find this Da Vinci Code. And so I leave it to everyone here to find it out for yourself. Talking about my opinion, I'll be completely honest. There were times where the main character, Robert, really annoyed me. So Mary had been gone for years, and still every time he failed at something or achieved something, he thought of her. I kept thinking, भाई self respect नाम की कोई चीज नहीं है क्या? She left you, pick yourself up. But it wasn't until the end of the book that I understood what she had meant by leaving him and how important it was for Robert to have faith in her. I found the poems and the texts from the Bible also very enlightening. Now, the stock market lessons that I learned from this book are also included in another book of W.D. Gann called The Truth of the Stock Tape, which which is also a very good suggestion by my side. Then there are other lessons such as the fractal theory, which talks about patterns repeating, which is not mentioned in any of his other books. So that's where I leave you guys. I hope you enjoyed today's book review, and I hope that I helped you decide whether you would like to read this book or not. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aditi. That was enlightening or eye-opening, and it is really fascinating how someone who on the one hand he is in such a left brain activity like stock trading can be so expressive in writing his memoirs.
Yeah.
And that too so creatively. The title itself got me hooked. Tunnel Through the Air. So what year was this written in and published?
1927.
Voice is echoing very badly. Is there anyone else? And are you on two devices now?
Is it still echoing now?
No, it's
okay.
So
this was published in 1927.
37.
Yeah, like 100 years back, basically.
All right. Great. Anyone who has any question, any follow-up questions on this book?
Yes, I do have a question.
Yes. Monica, yes.
Yes, first of all, I'd like to commend Aditi on a very interesting book review. And really, this is such an interesting, the very title, just the book selection is so awesome. I was familiar with W.D. Gann because I know of a very serious and passionate investor, a very senior one who used to talk about him. And the thing is that I never imagined that W.D. Gann in the format of a romance and science fiction would write such a coded book too. That itself is fascinating. So my question to you, and thank you for your really nice book review. So my question to you is, Aditi, what is the language of this book like? Like, what's the prose like? Because there's supposed to be this, big secret hidden, or maybe, multiple secrets hidden about trading, perhaps. But, what's the language like? I mean, are we supposed to get clues from the language, or what?
His language is very simple. I think so 1/5 of the book actually consists of Bible texts and a lot of numbers and there are a lot of numbers in this book. So I feel like if you know a roadmap to find the secret, then you will be able to. I did not. I just read this to be entertained. So that's why.
Okay.
You have a question?
Hi, Manmeet here. Hi, Aditi. I think a wonderful review for somebody so young in age. You've gone really deep into it and explained it so well. Did the thought come across your mind that you still have a very long life ahead? You've just got started. So one day you'll get back to finding out the secret?
Good question.
Maybe if I feel like reading this book again, I surely will. Personally, I had no intention of finding the secret in it. But if I read it again, then let's see. Because in the beginning of the book, Can says that most people find it the third time they read it. So I do have a lot of years ahead of me. If I do read it the third time, let's see if I find it out or not.
Surprisingly, you remind me of some friends of mine who recommended reading this book, Autobiography of a Yogi, repeatedly. There's a hidden secret in that too. So there must be some really something secret among these books of your maybe 100 years back, which could benefit us greatly.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Well done. Well done. Wonderful.
Is there any other book which is written by W.D. Gann?
Yes, actually. So there's another book written by W.D. Gann which I have read. It's called Truth of the Stock Tape. And there are, I think, a couple of more books. The one that I have read is Truth of the Stock Tape. This has the lessons which are covered in this book minus the fictional stories. So Truth of the Stock Tape has all of these lessons which I talked about minus the story.
Was it written by W.D. Gann or it is someone else?
W.D. Gann only.
So, Amarendra, you have any question?
Yeah, just let me know. I'm in a noisy place. Am I audible?
Yes, you are completely audible. Completely
So
audible.
all these innovations which she's talking about. So are these kind of documented in? I mean, is it well known and proven in the contemporary world?
Not at all. So this part is all fictional. The death ray melting things in front of it and a machine that helps you read minds of people far away from you. I don't think that they have been invented yet. But surely he says that everything in this book is either true or will be true in the future. So let's see if people make it in the future.
So is it fiction or what is the genre then? Is it fiction?
Yes, the genre is science fiction.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
So interesting that even though the genre is science fiction, but yet it is rooted in the his life, his love life, and so many things about stock trading, so many interesting facets of stock trading, everything meshed in together. This must be quite a potpourri of ideas through the pages. So I'm really tempted to pick it up. Is it available on Amazon?
Yes, it is. So I read it on Amazon Kindle, but you can buy it as well.
So do we have any more questions or should we move on?
Yeah, I had a question. So Aditi,
Yes.
is it known whether the secret actually is revealed or exists in any other of W.D. Gann's books? Because he has written on, a number of things related to stocks, financial astrology and just all his very unique, methods for the stock market. So is it there? Can we, try and pre out the secret from his other books, which might be, maybe an easier thing to do?
Yes, I got your question. Yeah, I got your question. So I don't think all of his other books are very straightforward. This is the only one where he says that there is a secret that's hidden within. And even here, most of the reviews say that they were not able to find his secret.
Even on the third reading?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So there was a review that I talked about that the person was able to find the secret after 11 years. He obviously didn't mention the secret in the review. I don't think that they would share that after working for 11 years. But that was the only review that I found where someone said that they were able to.
I,
Well, the
I
book
am
is
I am I am tempted to think that this might be a case of the Loch Ness monster, where there is not much evidence of it, but just the fact that there is this myth of the Loch Ness monster is the source of so much tourism to that area in Scotland. So that could be it, perhaps, or perhaps the secret is so deep that it's decipherable only to the very rare few.